Gambling's a thing, guys, and I'm one for the less regulation, the better. I got no problem with it. We all have our vices. That doesn't happen to be mine. I know Caleb likes to gamble, and we certainly appreciate our relationship with Zen Sports. And I think in the end of the day, that deregulation of gambling will lead to less wrongdoings, because I think when you regulate it and you have things out there, that eventually it gets better. And I think we've seen that with marijuana. I think we've seen that, if you want to go back to the 1920s, with alcohol. I think we saw it there. So amidst Iowa's gambling scandal, their coach Kirk Ferentz says that Iowa is the only state with a criminal investigation into its athletes. That is the exact wrong stance to take. Number one, Caleb, you don't want to say woe is me when you could be in the middle of something very, very, very serious. I don't believe Josh Heupel or Shane Beamer or Nick Saban or anybody in that I can think of, other than maybe Eli Drinkwitz, would handle it this way, because what you need to say is this is very serious and we're going to take care of it yesterday. That's what Alabama baseball did. They fired a guy within 48 hours of news coming out. This is just a really poor response by Iowa. And I would hope that any SEC team, especially with pressure from the conference, would handle it much, much better than the way Ferentz is handling it. You don't say, oh, it's just we're getting investigated. It must be happening elsewhere. No, that's not the right take.
I'm going to ask you, though, do you think he's right? Whether or not it's the right or wrong take, do you think that maybe other states like a Tennessee would be, shall we say, covering for athletes if they're doing this?
No, because I think that, I watched this the recent show. I binge watched it, watched the whole thing, Painkillers with Matthew Broderick, and it's about the Oxycontin epidemic. And there was basically one person that worked at the DA's office that was uber motivated by, in this case, crack cocaine in her past. And she didn't want to see that happen again with our society. So whether you're motivated by that or making your career, I think if somebody the right person came across gambling was an issue with an SEC football team, I think they would absolutely jump all over it and dog it until they found something. So no, I don't think that Iowa is being unfairly persecuted, if that was your question.
Oh, I don't think they're being unfairly persecuted either. I was just curious as why, if it's happening at Iowa, my guess, because it happened at Iowa and Iowa State. Right. So both schools got caught with this. So it wasn't a program problem. It was clearly statewide. So if it's happening at both schools, I get the hunch that it's happening elsewhere.
And no. I think it is happening elsewhere. As a matter of fact, I would go ahead and go out on a limb and say there is an athlete in all 50 states that in some fashion is gambling in ways that he shouldn't be and is at a college institution. Maybe a little bitty. It may still be that I'm betting $100 on a game with a buddy. But yes, I think it's probably happening in all 50 states. And the bottom line is, if you want to do it, you better be smart about it.
Yes, and I think it's more likely to happen at programs that don't matter as much. So if you're Tennessee, within a year, you hope that you're going to have a team, your whole team's going to be made up of players that's thinking about the NFL. So they're not going to throw anything. You don't think Vanderbilt might have a few players that know they're not going anywhere, that are like, hey, who cares? Why not just bet against my team to cover today?
Yeah. Or Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri might be betting against his own team because he knows he's going to lose. I can't stop throwing in Missouri shots. No, you bring up a good point. And again, with NIL, even small NIL deals, these players have money in their pocket. So, Caleb, again, I know you gamble. I don't, and it's not anything against it. It's not any moral thing. I just haven't had that vice. But I think there's a very slippery slope in that you could see a player gamble and with a bookie and get forced into stuff. However, with the regulation of it, you're going to be able to track that guy fairly quickly. And we've seen that with some other athletes. Was it Calvin Ridley, I believe? We've seen that with other players where they show up on some of these searches pretty easily, and you can figure out it's them because of credit card numbers and everything's trackable. So I just think it's a matter of time till some of these district attorney offices decide they want to dive into this. And if they wanted to in almost any state, especially a sports crazed state, I bet they could find somebody doing it in almost any one.
So this is where I am with it. It's funny because everybody's debated what role Congress should play in NIL. And I've been one, Congress, stay out of NIL. Let the players make any money they want. Congress, NCAA, leave them alone. I think gambling is a totally different story. And I think this is where actually there should be federal laws. There needs to be federal laws where you are not, Dave, you're an investor. If you get caught insider trading, you go to prison. Period. End of story. If you are betting in the stock market on a company that you run, if we go publicly traded and you start betting on, although that's not going to happen anytime soon, but I mean, if we were to be LLC and you started betting on us in the stock market, you and I would go to prison for that because that's insider trading and illegal. Well, betting on the sports you play is a form of insider trading. And I think that there should be federal laws against that, for or against. I mean, I thought Pete Rose should have done time in federal prison for betting on baseball. I do. And I don't care that he bet on his team to win every time because, as you know, in baseball, if you're a manager, you can you might bring in a relief pitcher that you wouldn't bring in that day because you bet a lot of money to win that game. And
in July instead of having him fresh for September.
Exactly. So I am huge on, I'm for a federal law. You can't bet on a sport you play. And if you do, you are, and I think sports should have a law where if you bet on the sport you play, I think they should do it with the baseball thing. You're permanently barred from ever playing this sport again. You can't collect a check. I don't even think Pete Rose should be allowed to collect a pension from Major League Baseball. I mean, that is the one, to me, that is the worst crime you can commit in the sport you play. I think Calvin Ridley should be banned from the NFL. I don't think he should ever be allowed to set foot on a football field again, honestly. And I know that's harsh, but that's where I land.
No, I totally agree with that stance because it's the difference between what we watch as sports and reality television, which is the most unreal television that is on television. Those reality shows are all set up. So if you were to somehow adjust sports and manipulate the outcome of those, that to me would be a major problem on your team or not. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I will say this with the NFL, I think if it was a serious gambling problem in college, the way they would handle it, which I don't really like, but I think the way they would handle it is you would basically just be blackballed. And I don't know that there would be a formal announcement, but you just wouldn't get drafted. Now, what if you're an elite player? Then somebody's going to want to take you. So you do need to have those laws in place. And I'm with you. I got no problem with that. I think that's refreshing that you said that because I know a lot of people want to back Pete Rose because he was a good old guy and stuff. He wasn't. He was a gangster in a baseball uniform.
Yes, and that is. I'm okay with letting PED players back on the field. I get PEDs. You're cheating. You're trying to gain an edge. It's an unfair edge. You're compromising the game a little bit. You suspend them. You bring them back if they do it one time. I'm fine with that. Gambling, PEDs don't threaten the very credibility of the league the way gambling does. It just doesn't. And people who try to say that what McGuire or Bonds did is worse than what Pete Rose did, no, it's not. And I'm not saying McGuire or Bonds deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think they do either. But I'm saying Pete Rose crossed a line that you shouldn't cross. And if college football and NFL doesn't get this under control, and I say this as somebody who thinks sports should embrace gambling to a certain degree. I think if you're one of the smaller sports and you're trying to get big, if you're the WNBA, you should go all in on sports gambling. You should embrace and advertise it and try to make it. That'll make your league cool. But you can't let your players or your coaches or your administrators bet. That's my one rule. If you are affiliated with the league, you can't bet on the league. And there should be federal laws on that.
Yep. And it would be bad for some programs in the short term, but it would be better I believe, for our society and gambling in the long term. Again, I'm anti-regulation in general. I'm not saying that heroin should be legal or anything like that, but I'm anti-regulation for the most part. And I think that the vast majority of people that smoke marijuana or gamble, that they do it as entertainment. And I don't think you see some of the extreme cases of abuse that you do with some other vices. But so based on that, I have no problem. Again, I don't want heroin available at the local convenience store. 7-Eleven special of the day. How about some smack? But
I watched a whole Chris Rock stand up recently, and he's like, just legalize crack, just so my friends' parents can have something to brag about. And so, he's like, my son's got his own crack house down the road, and he's doing it big. But to be fair, I mean, look, you just talked about the Painkillers documentary you watch. I mean, how many people, how many pharmacists have, bragged, I'm a very successful pharmacist. And that really means that you were selling legal drugs that were as bad as heroin.
No, and by the way, you need to watch that show. It's phenomenal. For Caleb Calhoun, Matthew Broderick puts the whipped cream and the cherry on top of his career in Painkillers, just randomly suggesting that and endorsing it because I stayed up till 4 a.m. working on something and it was on in the background. So there you go. And Vols Time said, what would keep the player getting a family member to place a bet for them? Well, that very well could happen.
But that can happen like with insider trading too. That's just that you're not going to fully prevent it.
Yeah, exactly. We're not saying you're going to eradicate it, but you can at least scare a lot of people away from doing it, and you can put those that are abusing it in prison. So I'm called a libertarian. I don't even know what that means. I've always
libertarian is the.
I know what it means. I just always have said I wouldn't share my politics with people. That's just what I think in general. I've never in 25 years shared my politics with people. I'm not going to do that because I know you want to hear about sports. So maybe I went a little bit too far. But he says it's cool. Robert says it's cool. So I guess being a libertarian, if that's what I am, is cool, I guess.